Mr. Brooks, I know who you are. Open the door, I need answers.
It was the secret moment of Henry Brooks, a hidden millionaire, standing on the brink of exposure. He had quietly spent $2 million to build a community center for this small town, but no one was supposed to know. Until today, would he be able to maintain his disguise? Or would everything he had built crumble in a single night? The story begins here. In a small town called Willow Creek, Ohio, where old wooden houses line a road covered with golden leaves every autumn, there lived a man everyone recognized, but no one truly knew. Henry Brooks, 62 years old, with silver hair and a lean frame, often wore a worn brown coat and a faded baseball cap. He'd show up at the grocery store, buying a few loaves of bread, or sit on a park bench, reading the newspaper. The locals called him Gentle Henry, a retired man living modestly on a pension, or so they thought. But Henry was no ordinary man. He was a millionaire with a fortune worth tens of millions of dollars, tucked away in bank accounts and investment funds. No one in Willow Creek knew this, and Henry wanted to keep it that way. He didn't drive a fancy car, live in a mansion, or flaunt his wealth. Instead, he chose a different life, one where his riches weren't defined by what he owned, but by what he quietly gave away. It all began on a cold winter morning when Henry walked into the Willow Creek Community Center, a small, rundown building where seniors gathered to play chess, sip coffee, and chat to stave off lonely days. He brought a box of homemade cookies, set it on the table, and said, "I made too many, so help yourselves." Ellen, a 68-year-old regular, laughed heartily. "Henry, you're always so kind. Why don't you keep some for yourself?" Henry just smiled and replied, "I like sharing better." What no one knew was that earlier that morning, Henry had discreetly written a $100,000 check to the community center, signed anonymous donor. The money went toward fixing the heating system, broken for 2 winters. When the staff announced the good news, the room erupted in cheers, thanking the mysterious benefactor. Henry sat in the corner, cradling a cup of coffee, quietly watching. His eyes sparkled with joy, but his lips stayed silent. So who was Henry Brooks? Why would a man who could buy an entire building choose to live as a nobody? To understand, we must look back at his past, a long journey marked by hardship, loss, and, ultimately, an awakening. Henry hadn't always wanted to hide. There was a time when he basked in the glow of wealth and fame. But what changed him? What drove a millionaire to this path? Imagine yourself at 62, after a lifetime of hard work. What would you do with your money? Buy a beach house to relax? Travel the world? Or, like Henry, would you choose something greater, something unseen but felt by all? This is the story of a man who discovered the true meaning of wealth, not in a bank vault, but in the hearts of those around him. Henry Brooks wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He grew up on a small farm in rural Ohio, where freezing winters left young Henry's hands chapped and cracked as he hauled sacks of potatoes to help his parents. In 1959, when Henry was just 12, his father died of a sudden illness, leaving his mother and 3 siblings in a rickety house with no electricity or hot water. "I remember my mom crying at the kitchen table, but she never gave up," Henry once told a close friend. "She taught me that life doesn't hand you anything for free. You have to take it for yourself." At 15, Henry dropped out of school to work at a truck garage in a nearby town. The job was dirty and grueling, wiping grease, hauling tires, but the skinny teenager never complained. The garage owner, Joe, once said, "That kid had bright eyes, not because he was smart, but because he wouldn't back down." Henry earned $2 a day, and every night, he counted each coin, dreaming of a day when he'd have something bigger. At 25, Henry had saved enough to buy an old truck, and he started hauling freight for hire. That was the beginning of his journey to wealth. He worked 16 hours a day, driving down dark roads, sometimes sleeping in the cab to save on rent. "Once, I nearly died falling asleep on the highway," Henry recalled. "But I thought, if I stop, I'll never escape poverty." The business gradually grew. From one truck, Henry bought a second, then a third. By 1985, at age 35, he founded Brooks Transport, a small company with 10 trucks and 10 drivers. Customers loved Henry for his reliability. One once said, "If Henry promised delivery at 6 a.m., You'd see his truck parked out front by 5:55. But success didn't come easily. In 1995, a business partner swindled Henry out of $200,000, nearly all the money he'd saved. The company teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. Henry had to sell the family home he'd just bought for his wife and 2 kids, moving them into a cramped, run-down apartment. That night, he sat alone in the empty living room, staring at a family photo, and cried. "I wondered if I'd been wrong to dream big," he once confided. But Henry didn't give up. He borrowed money from an old friend and started over with just 1 truck. This time, he was more cautious, smarter. He learned to negotiate, expand his network, and invest in technology to optimize transportation. By 2005, Brooks Transport had become one of the largest trucking companies in the Midwest United States, with 150 trucks and annual revenue reaching $20 million. Henry, now 50, was a millionaire, something the poor farm boy of years past could never have dreamed of. But the cost of success was steep. His wife, Emily, who had stood by him through the hardest days, died of cancer in 2010. Henry didn't get to say goodbye. He was at a meeting 300 miles from home when she passed. "I spent my life building an empire," Henry said, his voice choking. "But I didn't have time to hold on to the most important person." That loss broke his heart, and he began to wonder, was money really everything? In 2020, at the age of 60, Henry made a decision that stunned all his friends and business partners. He sold Brooks Transport for $100 million. Everyone thought he'd buy a beachfront house in Florida and live a lavish retirement. But Henry didn't do that. He moved back to Willow Creek, bought a small, old house, and began living like an ordinary man. "I don't need more money," he told his closest friend. "I need a reason to wake up every morning." That's when Henry Brooks vanished from the spotlight of the business world, and the hidden millionaire was born. He didn't want fame or praise. He wanted to use his money to do something more meaningful, not for himself, but for those around him. But the question remains, what awaits him in Willow Creek? And how long will his secret stay hidden? In the spring of 2022, Henry Brooks was still living his simple life in Willow Creek. Every morning, he woke up early, brewed a cup of black coffee, and took a walk around town. He liked stopping at familiar street corners, chatting with neighbors, or helping someone pick up a dropped bag of groceries. The townsfolk had grown accustomed to gentle Henry, a cheerful retiree always ready to spare a few coins or offer a heartfelt piece of advice. One day, as he passed a narrow alley near his home, Henry heard a raspy cough coming from an old wooden house. The windows were broken, the roof leaked, and smoke rose from the chimney as if the fireplace inside was struggling to fend off the early spring chill. Henry paused, peered over the fence, and saw an elderly woman, around 70, trying to start a fire with a few damp twigs. It was Martha Evans, a widow living alone, known to the whole town for her sad story. Her husband had passed away 10 years earlier, and her only son had moved far away, rarely returning. Henry approached and knocked gently on the door. "Do you need any help?" he asked in his warm, steady voice. Martha looked up, her tired eyes managing a faint smile. "Oh, Mr. Henry, I'm fine. It's just this fireplace won't cooperate." Henry glanced around. The house was cold, the walls cracked, and the furniture so worn it seemed ready to collapse at any moment. He knew Martha wasn't fine, but he didn't say more. He simply smiled, turned away, and in his mind, a plan began to take shape. That night, Henry sat in his small house, opened his laptop, and contacted an old friend, Tom, a construction contractor in Cleveland. "Tom, I need you to fix up a house in Willow Creek," Henry said over the phone, keeping his voice low so no one could overhear. "But don't tell anyone I'm the one paying for it. Call it a charity project." Tom laughed heartily. "Henry, you're as strange as ever. All right, just send me the address." Henry wrote a check for $50,000, enough to fully renovate Martha's house, from the leaky roof to the heating system, even adding a fresh coat of paint. He mailed it with a note that read, "Anonymous donation from a friend of Willow Creek." 2 days later, Tom and his crew showed up at Martha's doorstep. "Mrs. Evans, we've been hired to fix your house," Tom said. "A kind soul paid for it, but we're not allowed to say who." Martha was stunned. She stood there, hand clutching her chest, tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Who would do this for an old woman like me? As the crew got to work, Henry watched from a distance, hidden behind a large oak tree. He saw Martha smile, the first smile he'd seen from her in months, and his heart felt warm. But Henry's secret wasn't easy to keep forever. A week later, when Martha's house was fully renovated, a new roof, gleaming windows, and a warm fireplace, she invited a few neighbors over to thank the anonymous benefactor. Henry was invited too, since she knew him as the kind man in town. He arrived, carrying a box of cookies as usual, and sat quietly in the corner. During the conversation, Martha held up an old newspaper she'd found among her late husband's belongings. It was an article from 2005 about Henry Brooks, the man who built a Midwest trucking empire. She looked at the photo in the paper, then at Henry, her eyes widening. "Mr. Henry," she said, her voice trembling, "you look so much like the man in this picture. Are you?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Henry. Henry gave a gentle smile and set the cookie box down. "Mrs. Martha, I'm just an old man who likes baking," he replied, his tone playful. "If I were a millionaire, I'd have bought the whole town by now, right?" Everyone laughed, and the conversation quickly shifted. But Martha kept looking at him, her gaze a mix of suspicion and gratitude. She didn't press further, but in her heart, a piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. After that day, Henry knew his secret couldn't stay hidden forever. But he wasn't afraid of being exposed. He just wanted to keep helping in his own way. Fixing Martha's house wasn't just a material gift. It was Henry's way of giving back to life. A life that had given him much, but also taken plenty. "I couldn't save Emily," he once thought while standing at his wife's grave. "But I can save others, in the way I know how." Martha now lived more comfortably, but what she cherished most wasn't the new house. It was the feeling of being cared for. And Henry, in his small home, began to think bigger. If he could change one person's life, why not an entire community? What would his next move be? And would his secret truly come to light? After helping Martha, Henry Brooks felt a small flame ignite in his heart, a feeling he hadn't had since losing Emily. He realized that while his own life was settled, there were still many in Willow Creek who needed help, especially the elderly like him. Retirees living alone, lacking a place to gather, and sometimes even missing simple joys. The town's old community center, with its cracked walls and broken chairs, wasn't enough to provide that. One summer evening in 2023, Henry sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the distant fields gold. He pulled out an old notebook and began to write. Build a new community center, a place where people can laugh, talk, and feel like they belong. He calculated, $2 million from his fortune would be enough to make this dream a reality. But as always, Henry didn't want anyone to know he was behind it. He wanted it to be a gift from the town, not just from him. Henry reached out to Tom, his contractor friend, again. "Tom, I need a new community center for Willow Creek," he said over the phone, his voice low but firm. "Make it good, a room for chess, a small library, and a kitchen where people can cook together. But remember, don't say I'm the one paying." Tom chuckled. "Henry, you're a real oddball. But I'll do it, like it's a big charity project from my company." In September 2023, construction of the community center began. The people of Willow Creek were astonished to see a crew arrive, tearing down the old building and raising a new one, spacious, modern, yet cozy with a wooden roof and large windows. Rumors spread quickly. Someone donated $2 million. Was it a big organization? Or some rich person from the city? No one suspected Henry Brooks, the man who still brought cookies to the old center every week. As the center neared completion, Henry often stopped by, wearing his baseball cap and pretending to be just another curious townsfolk. He blended into the crowd, listening to the chatter. Ellen from the center said, "Whoever did this must be an angel." Another added, "I bet it's some millionaire wanting to show off." Henry just smiled to himself, but inside, his joy was greater than any praise. The grand opening approached, and the center was named Willow House, a place with a chess room, shelves full of books, and a big kitchen wafting with the scent of fresh-baked goods. The town's elderly gathered, laughing, playing cards, and for the first time in years, Willow Creek felt alive again. Henry stood at a distance, watching the scene, and thought, "This is what Emily would have wanted me to do, bring joy to others." But things didn't stay smooth forever. A week before the grand opening, a local journalist named Sarah Miller began digging. Sarah, 35, was a woman who thrived on chasing headline-worthy stories. She discovered that Tom's company had received $2 million from a personal account, not a charitable fund. Tracing the paperwork, she uncovered the name Henry Brooks, the same man featured in a 2005 business article. Sarah came to Willow Creek, armed with a camera and a curious smile. She knocked on Henry's door. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Sarah from the Willow Times. I know you're the one who built the community center. Why hide it?" Henry opened the door, still in his old coat, and invited her in. He brewed tea, sat down, and said, "Sarah, I'm not hiding anything. I just didn't want people to think this was about me alone. It's a gift for all of us." Sarah wasn't convinced. "But $2 million. You're a millionaire, aren't you? What do you want from this fame?" Henry sighed, gazing out the window. "You know, I once had fame, money, everything. But when my wife died, I realized none of it could bring her back. I built this center not for praise. I built it because I want to see people happy, like I was with Emily." Sarah fell silent, her pen hovering over her notebook. She looked at Henry, and for the first time, she saw a man unlike the stories she'd chased before. But Sarah still published her article, "The Hidden Millionaire Behind Willow House." The news spread fast. Some in Willow Creek admired Henry even more, but others began to whisper, "He's just doing it to show off and stand out." Henry faced his greatest challenge yet. Would he let the criticism shake his purpose? After Sarah Miller's article, Henry Brooks was no longer the anonymous, gentle Henry. The people of Willow Creek looked at him differently, some with admiration, some with suspicion, and others with mere curiosity. People started knocking on his door, asking, "Mr. Henry, is it true you're a millionaire?" Henry would just smile lightly and reply, "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that we have Willow House to enjoy together." Even so, the whispers didn't stop. One afternoon, as Henry brought cookies to the community center, he overheard someone mutter, "He's just doing it for attention. What kind of millionaire lives in a rundown house like that?" Henry paused, his hand tightening around the cookie box. He turned, looked at the person, and said, "If I wanted attention, I wouldn't have hidden my name. I just wanted people to have a place to laugh, to live, like I once wished for my own family." His voice was low but firm, and the room fell silent. No one said more, but their gazes shifted from doubt to respect. Henry stepped outside, stood under the large oak tree near the center, and sighed. He wasn't angry at the criticism. He only feared they wouldn't understand his heart, a heart that had lost Emily, but found meaning in helping others. "I don't need them to know who I am," he told himself. "I just need them to know someone cares." Time passed, and Henry, now 65, still lived in his small house in Willow Creek. He didn't change his routine, brewing coffee each morning, walking around town, and bringing cookies to Willow House. The community center had become the heart of the town. Seniors gathered to play chess, celebrate birthdays, and even teach cooking classes for kids. Every smile there was part of Henry's legacy, though he never took credit. One day, Martha Evans, the woman who had nearly uncovered Henry's secret, came to visit him. She brought a hand-knitted scarf, placed it in his hands, and said, "Henry, I know you don't like hearing this, but I have to say it. Thank you, not just for my house, but for everything you've done for us." Henry looked at her, his eyes misting with emotion. "Martha, I didn't do it alone," he replied. "We all made this happen." As Martha left, Henry sat in his armchair, gazing at Emily's photo on the table. He smiled and whispered, "See, Emily? I've done something worthwhile." Outside, the sound of laughter from Willow House drifted in, like a melody of joy he had planted. Henry Brooks wasn't the only hidden millionaire in the world. Somewhere out there, others quietly give, not for fame, not for praise, but because they believe life is truly rich only when we bring joy to others. Henry found that meaning at 65, after a lifetime of work, loss, and awakening. What about you? You don't need millions of dollars to become a hidden millionaire. A smile, an hour of help, or a small gift, that's how you can leave your own legacy. Henry did it in Willow Creek. What will you do for those around you? Perhaps the poor children in the mountains, or anyone who needs a helping hand. The story closes with Henry sitting on a park bench, watching the people in Willow House through the window. A gentle breeze blows, golden leaves fall, and his smile blends into the sunset. Wealth isn't what you keep, but what you give away. But Henry's story doesn't end here. His journey has inspired us, and perhaps you too. So what will you do today to become your own hidden millionaire? Share your thoughts in the comments. A small action you'd like to take, a person you want to help. Every story you share is a seed for change. Don't miss episode 2. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out.